It is time to bring in our State House insiders, Antoine Seawright, our Democrat strategist, and Joel Sawyer, our Republican strategist. Lots of news from Capitol Hill this week involving South Carolina, removing Kevin McCarthy as the House Speaker earlier this week. Nancy Mace, one of 8 Republicans, the 1st District Congressman to do that. Jim Clyburn, the 6th District Congressman, voting to oust McCarthy as well. And Joel, we're going to begin with you and your reaction. Nancy Mace says that she's doing what is right and what is right for the state of South Carolina. Your take?
I think that this is, look, for these 8 Republicans who did this, I mean, I think that it's largely a personal branding thing in terms of, just being able to build their own personal brand. It doesn't really do anything for Republicans' ability to push legislation forward, to do the things that they've talked about doing. But for those 8 Republicans who voted that way, look, I mean, it's going to be a fundraising boon for them. It's not lost on anyone, from from the people and the various PACs who helped Nancy Mace get elected. Some of those PACs being run by Kevin McCarthy that, she turned around and voted against him. So, it'll be an interesting road ahead for her, I think.
Well, Joe, I think it's very important to note that this effort was led by these 8 Republicans. It just so happened Kevin Can't Be Trusted McCarthy was the reason for Democrats actually putting their support around removing him from the speakership. In the words of Jay-Z, it was all good a week ago until Kevin McCarthy, former speaker, went on Face the Nation, beating down on Democrats and basically walking back an agreement that he had already had. And so it came down to a matter of trust. I think it's important to note that this was a bipartisan effort. So this wasn't some radical, extreme Democratic thing because Republicans are in charge. And I think when you look at the fact that as the Speaker of the House, not many people, probably you included, Joe, can point to anything that the Republican-led majority has done to deliver for the American people. Contrast that with what happened in the 117th Congress, then you have to say to yourself, well, was he being effective? And lastly, I'll say this came about because of how he got the job. And when you lay in cotton, you have to expect that you're going to pick up some lint. He committed to the rules, being able to remove him. He took the bait from Matt Gaetz, and voila, he is now the former speaker instead of the Speaker of the House.
We are about 4 months, a little more than 4 months away from the Republican presidential primary here in South Carolina. A new Winthrop University poll out showing the former president with 51% of support in South Carolina. Former Governor Nikki Haley with 17%. And surprisingly, Senator Tim Scott with only 6% of support here in South Carolina. I guess, Joel, looking at these numbers, if Haley and Scott don't do well here, will they do well anywhere, and will they ultimately drop out?
Well, that's a great question, and that's something I said from the very beginning when they got into this race. I think I have to say the word "darned if you do, darned if you don't." Where if you do well in South Carolina, if you're Nikki Haley or Tim Scott, it's like, well, of course you did well. It's your home state. If you don't do well in South Carolina, it's like, wow, you can't even win your home state. So it'll be interesting to see, what kind of narrative they craft after this. I think the really interesting part at this point is going to be who makes it to South Carolina, right? Because when you have a fractured field like this, I think that these polling numbers are very different than what it would be if, say, it was Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, and one other person, or Donald Trump, Tim Scott, and one other person. Once this field starts to winnow down some, I think we'll really see how much of an appetite there is out there to make a change on the Republican side from Trump as a nominee.
I think the muscle memory of the former president continues to beef itself up here in South Carolina and other places. Nikki Haley at 17%, quite frankly, doesn't mean a damn thing because it's winner take all in the Republican preference primary. I think it says a lot that Tim Scott, statewide official in South Carolina, first African American, all the credentials that he proudly highlights, the fact that he has not been one to engage or either take a real hard stance against any other candidate in the race. I think his poll numbers reflect the fact that the Republican primary voters are not looking for that. I think you've seen this slight uptick in Haley's surface level support because it's not deep or wide, it's very surface level. You've seen an uptick because she has been somewhat aggressive. And I think people who are looking for an alternative are still looking for someone to be somewhat aggressive as they see in the former president. But we have the former president sitting at 50+% or even above 40%. I think that says a lot about the electorate in South Carolina, particularly Republican preference primary voters who seem to be lockstep with the former president in spite of the pending indictments, the 91 charges that are pending, that he likely will be convicted of some of them at some point.
Antoine, another big story breaking today. President Biden, and a reversal now, saying that they're going to resume the border wall along the southern border. What's your take on that? Because he had said in the past that this would stop. It would not be built.
Well, as you know, J.R. Joe, that money was already allocated. You cannot redirect those funds. And so what the president and others have said is the money's been allocated. They have to be spent on that. And so let's just do just that. It's an obligation and a responsibility. Keep in mind, I don't think anyone would agree the fact that we have to do everything we can to deal with the immigration issue in this country. That should not be seen from a partisan lens. The real thing I think we have to put into this discussion is the fact that we had the former president saying that Mexico was going to build a wall. Instead, these are going to be American taxpayers' dollars used to continue to build the wall, and that will not, in my view, stop the immigration crisis we have to deal with from a legislative standpoint.
I mean, this is the classic flip flop, and Antoine can spin it a little bit. I get that, but this is just like George Bush, read my lips, no new taxes. Joe Biden said not one single more mile of wall will be built when I'm president, and he's reversing. He's flip flopping on that. Now, I happen to think it's a good thing. I think that we need physical security at the border. I think that we need technological security at the border, but I also think that we have to have a pathway to citizenship for the millions and millions of immigrants who are already here. Some of those immigrants who are already here, because I mean, the reality is that you cannot deport every single person that's here illegally. I mean, the genie is out of the bottle on that. And unfortunately, this is one of those situations where it's very difficult to come to a bipartisan agreement because, one side is locked on doing it one way and one side is locked on doing it another way. And it's going to have to be a little bit of all of the above.
All right. Joel Sawyer, Antoine Seawright, guys, as always, thank you so much for your time. For the very latest on what's going on in the world of politics, as always, simply go to our website. That's WLTX.com. A quick